Do you ever question your beliefs or ask yourself why you believe what you do? I believe in God, not just because I was raised to, but because I feel the presence of God in my life. Now, some might say, how do you know it's God? And for me to physically show that in an example would be really hard. But I believe that there is a force of good, or dare I say energy, that flows through every part of the universe. I don't think we can ever fully understand who God is and how God works, and I don't think we're supposed to. Although I have my beliefs, I've always questioned doctrines and things I've been taught. Partly because I know that whoever teaches me the Bible, for example, is interpreting it how they see it. I remember one of the best sermons I heard in church was by a priest who said that a lot of times in Christianity, we're taught to fear God. We're taught that God is vengeful and that there are dire consequences whenever we do something that is a sin. The God of the Old Testament, for example, is an angry God, while the God of the New Testament is a more understanding God. He said, I think for too long, we've been giving human qualities to God and carrying out violent acts in his name. He ends the sermon by saying, I know one thing for sure. The God I serve is gentle, kind, loving, and a gracious God. Our relationship with God is personal, no matter what religion we might practice. I was 10 when I heard that, and it stuck with me ever since. I say all of this to say, I believe in God, and although I was raised Christian, I don't believe Christianity is the only way to God. And because of this, I've always been very curious about other people's beliefs and where they come from. For me, it's one of the windows into how other people view the world. In today's episode, I'm going to be speaking with Calvin Smith, who is on the extreme end of the spectrum when it comes to religious beliefs, and that is because he is an atheist. I'm really excited for you all to listen to this conversation because I think it's important to hear different perspectives, not from a place of judgment, but just to listen and see how other people view the world. Calvin Smith is a musician, podcaster, and atheist activist from Southeast Michigan. Calvin hosts the podcast Unquestionable with Calvin Smith, a show about applying healthy skepticism to conspiracy theories, religion, historical narratives, and the paranormal. Nearly 7 years ago, Calvin fell down a hole of believing any and every conspiracy on the internet. It wasn't until the first read-through of the Bible that Calvin began to practice street epistemology and learn how to have conversations about beliefs and whether we have good justifications to warrant those beliefs. Atheism came shortly thereafter, and the rest is history. Calvin now strives to know as many true things and as many false things as possible at any cost. Some fun facts about Calvin: he has an original song called Empty Room, which is available on all streaming platforms. He was recently on a show called Truth Wanted, which is a show hosted by an organization called the Atheist Community of Austin. He loves ancient history, especially Egyptian and Mesoamerican history, and incorporates it into his show on skepticism. And he reads religious texts for fun. He's read the Bible in 2 different translations, the King James Version and the New Living Translation, the Quran in English, and currently he is reading the Book of Mormon. My conversation with Calvin is really about learning how to cultivate healthy skepticism about what we believe. Calvin starts off by talking about his journey from Christianity to atheism. What is the definition of atheism? How does he tackle existential questions? The biggest misconceptions people have of atheists, and so much more. I really enjoyed my conversation with Calvin, and I believe that you will as well. Let's get into the show.
So my family was never really extremely religious. You know, I remember growing up and kind of going to church until maybe I was 6 or 7 years old. Around that time, my parents split up, and, you know, my mom, being a single mom, just couldn't bring me to church anymore. And my dad was never really religious at all either. So my siblings were really into conspiracy theories and because they're a couple of years older than I am. So they were into like conspiracy theories and reading about like aliens and ghosts. And I have a lot of Native American heritage in my family. So, you know, a lot of superstitions involving Native Americans and stuff like that. And yeah, that kind of, I latched on more to the conspiracy theories and paranormal and stuff and spirituality more than I did religion. But if someone were to approach me and ask me when I was 10, 12 years old, hey, what religion I would say that I was Christian, because that's what I was raised on. And yeah, it basically wasn't until I was maybe 18, 19 years old, I started getting really heavy into the conspiracy theories. I started thinking really crazy things. I was listening to, frankly, the wrong information on the internet. And, I was, for example, I thought, my go-tos, I used to think Hillary Clinton was a reptile. I thought she was a reptilian from outer space, specifically from the Draco constellation. And she had come to Earth, and her and like Justin Bieber and stuff were like alien reptilians, and they were running the government and eating babies and stuff. Like that's literally what I was convinced of. And I believe this wholeheartedly. I started a blog page on Facebook and everything, and I ended up turning my blog page into my podcast page, which is interesting. So all my old blogs you actually can still read on my podcast page, interesting enough. Left them available for people to read my growth, I guess. But yeah, I noticed as I was believing a lot of these conspiracy theories, reading a lot about like aliens and stuff, a lot of these people that I was listening to and believing in what they say, they were very religious. And some of these conspiracy theories were going towards like the Bible and stuff, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there's conspiracies that like maybe Jesus was just high on mushrooms and he was quote unquote seeing God and stuff like that. And, so a lot of stuff was leading back to the Bibles. And I thought, okay, so my family's religious. I probably should read the Bible, just see what's going on with it. These conspiracy theories are mentioning it. So why not? I downloaded a Bible on my phone. It's the King James Bible. And needless to say, if you're going to read the Bible for the first time, don't read the King James version. That is a really hard version to start off on, unless you're more familiar. I was not familiar with the Bible like whatsoever. So everyone was talking about the King James. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just read that one.
Right.
It's a lot tougher of a read, but did my best to read it. By the end of it, I basically consider myself an atheist. At the very least, I didn't seem convinced of the God of Christianity. And regardless of whether that God was real or not, I just wasn't really cool with the things that he was saying, doing, condoning. I just wasn't a big fan of it, regardless of whether he was real. But atheism came very shortly after. And but I was still holding on to these beliefs of conspiracy theories and ghosts and aliens and all this type of stuff. And I met my wife around this time, and my wife is very skeptical, and she definitely had a hand in with my healthy skepticism. But yeah, I started just looking deeper into these things. I thought if I had to be this skeptical about the Bible and about my belief in a God, I need to apply that same amount of skepticism to all of these other beliefs. I need to research them further than that, not so much confirmation bias. So I cut that out, and I basically did my research, and I came to the conclusion that there's no reason to believe in these anecdotal things that people are saying, and blurry photographs and stuff. That's, to me, it's not strong enough evidence to warrant a belief in space aliens, aliens from space coming to Earth, and let alone running the government and stuff. But basically it was from reading the Bible that I brought myself out of this conspiracy theory rabbit hole that I was in. And yeah, then I started practicing like straight epistemology. And straight epistemology, if anyone isn't aware, it's a Socratic method of questioning to essentially get to the basis of what people believe and why they believe it. And it's a pretty new method, kind of, not really new. It was originally practiced back in the time of like Socrates, in Greece and such. He would stand out on the side of the road and actually talk to people about what they believed and why they believed that. And it wasn't until about the 80s or 90s that a guy named Dr. Peter Boghossian, he actually picked up the method and kind of revamped it, wrote a book about it called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And I read it, and it's an amazing read. The cover of it sounds scarier than it actually is. It's not all about actually creating atheists, more so just about how to have good conversations with people as an atheist. So without being so mean, because a lot of people have like a misconception about atheists, that we're just all firebrand, out to get you or something.
Or
but me, I like just Yeah, my thing is more so I just want to get you to think, if this is what you
Mm-hmm.
believe, have you ever thought about this? What
Mm-hmm.
about these types of people that believe this? So street epistemology helped me out a lot with that. That kind of brings me into when I started my podcast, and I wanted to know why people believed these things.
Right.
So I started it up. I essentially wanted to make it more of like a debunking show,
Mm-hmm.
where I just kind of debunked these alien conspiracies and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't really vibing right with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started interviewing people, and I interviewed Anthony Magnabosco, who was at one point the president of Street Epistemology International. He's a big influence as to why I even started my podcast, and I interviewed a lot of doctors and a lot of people who think that the Atlanteans lived in America 2 million years ago and why they believe that. Talk to flat earthers, pastors. I just had a Satanist on him, talk to a Satanist. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to know why people believe these things, because I know why I believe these. Well, sometimes some of the things I legitimately don't know why I believed them. More so as I heard someone say it, I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. I want that to be real. But whether you want it to be real and whether there's actually evidence to warrant it being real, then that's
two different things.
That's two different things. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. I was crazy. I read the Bible, made me a little less crazy, and I like to think that I'm doing something good out of it.
Yeah, no, you are.
At this point, I'm trying to spread a healthy skepticism is my kind of my kind of forte.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very interesting to hear that you read the Bible and it actually brought you towards atheism, which is you don't hear that all the time. I'm like you in the sense that I also try to promote healthy skepticism for sure, especially when it comes to the different religions of the world and just kind of like questioning, like, I definitely do believe that there's a God, but how can you say that your particular practice is better than someone else's? So like just getting people to question their beliefs and stuff like that. So for those who don't really, I mean, I think people have a general sense of what an atheist is, but how would you describe atheism in your own words?
So atheism for me is, and for most atheists, many that I've talked to, the select few, but for majority of them, it is a lack of a belief in a God or gods, plural.
Okay.
That's it. It's not the affirmative notion that a God does not exist, because then that would land a burden of proof to where we need to prove that this God doesn't exist.
Right.
But I don't say that. I say a lack of belief. So someone approaches me, says, I believe that God is real and he loves you. And I just say, I don't believe you. That's it.
Right.
That's atheism. It's just, I just don't believe you, prove it. It's essentially whoever makes the positive claim needs to, support the evidence to support that. So, I mean, there are atheists out there that are hard atheists and they say there is no God, and they try to essentially disprove a God that it's just hard to disprove something that, we don't have evidence for in the first place. So, at least in my opinion, I guess I shouldn't say we don't have evidence for God. I would say we don't have sufficient strong evidence to warrant a belief in a God. I guess that's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I mean, I did the same, like as you were saying. For example, I read the Quran too. I just finished the Quran earlier this year, and I'm reading the Book of Mormon as well. And so, for example, a Muslim could come up with me with the Quran and say, Allah is real and loves you. Yeah. And then a Christian comes up to me and says, Jesus loves you and he's real. They both have a book and they say this book is the true word of their God. Who do I believe and why? If they're both saying the same things, just holding different books, what's the difference? I mean, now some people would argue that the God of Christianity and the God of Islam are kind of one and the same, Abrahamic religion in general, kind of. But that doesn't really match up for me personally, because I read the Quran and I read the Bible, and there's a very clear difference between the characteristics between those two gods. So I would never say that Allah and the God of Christianity are the same. They have very different traits. They're close but different.
Yes.
Not to mention Islam they don't claim that Jesus is. They claim that Jesus is just a prophet. They don't say that he is God or anything.
The savior.
Like they say it's blasphemous to call him God.
Right. According to the Wynn Gallup, in the United States, approximately 10% of Americans identify as atheists. Although the dollar bill says, "In God we trust," belief in Christianity is at an all-time low. Approximately 40% of American atheists are aged 18 to 29, and 37% of atheists are aged 30 to 49. This has been attributed to an increased exposure to diverse perspectives in multicultural societies, which dilutes the dominance of any one particular worldview. Millennials and Gen Z are the most racially, ethnically, and religiously diverse generation in the United States. And the country with the highest number of atheists is China. This is so interesting because, again, why I really enjoy listening to you and why I really connected with your podcast is, a lot of the questions that you ask, I ask as well. But again, like I do believe in a God, and I do think that it's one of those things where I've come to realize that your relationship with a higher power it's really personal. And I do think when you look at worldly religions at the core of it, if you take out all the noise and different interpretations from different people, it's really talking about love. But so with all of that, how do you answer existential questions? Because a lot of people turn to religion to try to figure out what is the purpose of life?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we here? What is my destiny? So, since becoming an atheist, how do you kind of answer those questions? Do you think about them and wonder why all of this is here?
Oh yeah, nearly every second of every day I think
Mhm.
about it, to be completely honest. I mean, I'm constantly thinking about, what does happen when we die,
Mhm.
but the whole thing that is very essential with being but healthy skepticism and
Yeah.
atheism is being able to just admit that you don't know.
Mhm.
That's a big
Mhm.
thing, is that, Christians, for example, will say, I know that God created the earth in 7 days or in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh.
Mhm.
But I don't, atheists, for the most part, again, there are some that do, but for the most part, and myself, I don't claim to know. I say the best
Mhm.
explanation is the Big Bang,
Mhm.
but I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's all in all. So when people ask me, um, how do you think the universe was created? I just say,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm.
And that's a perfectly okay answer, to be honest. If I'm not going
Absolutely.
to lie and say that I know, or not going to lie and say, oh yeah, I know because this scientist said something. No,
Mhm.
I let the science speak for itself, not the scientist.
Right.
And if I don't know, I don't know. I'm not going to lie and say that I know something, or say I don't know, therefore God. So
Yeah.
it's hard. And like, as far as like what happens like after death and stuff, I don't know. As far as
Mhm.
I can tell, I think death is going to be a lot like before you were born.
Mhm.
You don't remember what happened before you were born. You barely, most of the time, can't remember what happened before you were 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a lot like that. You're probably not even going to know that you're dead or that you died. It's just
Mhm.
it's just it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't really. I feel like we won't ever be able to comprehend that or experience
Mhm.
that without, I don't know. I guess a lack of experience, I wouldn't say, is an experience,
Right. Right.
essentially,
Right.
because when the brain decays, it's done. There's nothing going on. So there's no
Mhm.
reason for me to assume that anything would happen after that.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting you brought up the Big Bang Theory and like the whole notion of creation. Um, I think sometimes for me too, like, when I'm asking, when I do also say a lot of times, like, I don't know, like, nobody knows anything. The more you know, the less you know, really.
Right.
But I also ask the question too, I'm like, why is it, I don't understand why people feel the need to separate science and the whole idea of um something larger than us influencing that potentially. Like, why can't God, quote unquote, be the author or the catalyst that set off the Big Bang? Does that make sense? And then when
Yeah.
you think about time, right, time is relative. Like, what is time? So 7 days for quote unquote God could be billions of years for us, right? But nobody knows, right? So I try to like have those, I just try to drop those like gems, not to say like, oh, like that's what's actually happening, but just to think outside of the box. Like, we know nothing, and if there's a greater force at hand that we're not sure, we can't determine or predict how they act, right? And I think what people do a lot of times, that's kind of like a turnoff for a lot of people, is try to put human qualities and attach it to a god. And I just think that um I do believe that there is a God, but if there, but at the end of the day, like I can't actually prove that. But I think that whoever that God is or whatever that energy is not something that you can predict or define or try to be like, this is what they mean, this is what they're doing. If you do this, you're going straight to hell and all of those things. So, again, I just think that people tend to use a lot of their beliefs as justification to oppress people or act a certain way or be self-righteous. One thing you said on your one of your episodes was just kind of like, you said that you think it's really important for people to just be open-minded and be able to have these conversations. It doesn't matter like what you believe, because a lot of people are so dead set in their ways that they're like, oh, like you're an atheist, I'm not talking to you. You believe in God, I'm not talking to you. So like, can you speak more about why that's so important to you? And because I know that that's part of the point of your platform.
Yeah, defeating the stigma of talking about it, because a lot of people, and street epistemology has a lot to do with this. Anthony Magnabosco and Dr. Peter Boghossian, they have a lot to do with it. Because there's, once again, this big stigma that if someone approaches me and says, I believe in a God or something, and I say, why, they could get defensive and get angry. And the whole point of street epistemology is learning to essentially defuse the situation before it even erupts. So it's asking questions in a very careful, cordial way, very, low and easy tone. You're not being pushy, aggressive. You're not, especially not enforcing your beliefs on them. You don't want to attack them. You want to actually get to the basis of why they believe these things. And I'm just so interested, like why, if someone has evidence for a God or something, I want to know about it. I would never say that God does not exist because I don't know. If a God was, I don't know what it would take to convince me of any God, but if God was real and wanted me to know that he's real, he knows what it takes. And he just either hasn't done it yet or doesn't want me to know. And, or he doesn't exist. Those are the three options. But, and, if there's a God, I want to know about it. And that goes for like flat earth and aliens and stuff. If I had a couple flat earthers on my show, if they think that the earth is flat, I want to know about it, because that's going to change my life forever. That's going to change how I conduct the whole rest of my life if the earth is flat. So if they think that they have sufficient evidence, bring it to me. Please show me. Let's come on my platform. Let's talk about it. Not necessarily debate, but just talk about it. Be ready. And I warn these people like, hey, I'm going to question you, just so you know. Please don't be offended. Here are the questions I'm going to ask you. If you don't like any of these, let me know and I won't ask them. So they get a preface of all the questions I'll ask them. And it's just a conversation. A lot of the times it does. I guess not a lot of times. There's been probably 2 or 3 occasions it's gotten a little warm in the room from little bit of sparks flying. But all in the name of passion, not necessarily in anger. It's more so just, it's a defense mechanism. Right. I just want to know why these people believe these things. And if they, because I want to know as many true things and as few false things as possible. And how can you know that if you don't ask the opposing side what evidence they have?
Right. Okay. So the other question I wanted to ask you, because I'm curious, right? So, like people talk about intuition and like just having like random things happen that they can't really explain, or they just have like a premonition, like something's gonna happen. One, have you experienced anything like that? And if so, where do you think that comes from?
So I've had like deja vu and stuff like that. I don't know if that's kind of what you're going for, is like
Similar,
deja vu and stuff like that. Yeah. Kind of like, or like you kind of like, I guess, predict what's going to happen or something like that. Like you think about it and then it like happens. Yeah, I don't see any reason to, I mean, yeah, your brain does some weird stuff. It could be going off of previous memories. It could be going off of subconscious. It could be going off as far as movies that you've watched. That your brain is just remembering things. Your brain does all kinds of crazy stuff all the time. It's just nonstop firing neurons are crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't see any reason to think that a thought is any evidence of like, oh my gosh, I'm psychic. I thought that was going to happen or something. I've had some pretty weird deja vu to where it's like,
Mm.
I swear on my life this just happened, or like I
Mm-hmm.
just did this, a couple days ago or something like
Right.
that. But
Right.
all in all, it's just like, I don't know, that was weird. But like there's no way to necessarily test
Right.
it. So
Right.
I don't see I don't see a reason to believe it. We don't even have a method of testing it. So
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So at this point where you are right now, do you think that there's any possibility? Because like you said, like you have a healthy skepticism.
mhm.
You have conversations with different people from, different backgrounds, different beliefs, and everything. Do you think that there's a possibility that you could ever change from being an atheist?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
100%. Yeah, there's
Okay.
definitely there's all yeah, I'm totally
So
open
you're
to it.
that
Like I
open
said,
minded. Okay,
oh
cool.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean literally if someone, for example, who believes in, like Jesus is God,
Mm-hmm.
if they were to approach me with evidence that they can show empirically and demonstrably that this is evidence of a God. Once again, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what this would be, but
Mm-hmm.
God would know
Mm-hmm.
what it would take to convince me. So um, it's if it's presented before me, I 100% would accept it if it
Mm-hmm.
is sufficient. And it's if it's sufficient to me, it may not be sufficient to somebody else, but if it's
Mm-hmm.
sufficient to me, I will 100% believe it, and I will. I guess you could call me a Christian, but at
Mm-hmm.
this, because I would believe that Jesus is God, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I still wouldn't worship Jesus. I don't care. You could demonstrably show me that Jesus was God.
Mm-hmm.
I would not bow at his feet. I would go straight to hell happily, frankly.
So what is, if I'm curious as to like what that, because you just said if somebody was able to prove that Jesus was real and everything, that you wouldn't worship him. Like what is that aversion to, like, to doing that? Like what about Jesus is just kind of like, no, I don't think this is, I should be worshiping him.
So, couple couple things. Couple things. So for one, the condoning of slavery. That's a big thing for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
At no point did Jesus say, don't own people's property. He instead told you exactly what to do with your slaves. He said, slaves, obey your earthly masters like you would Christ. Um, what, why, why didn't you just say, don't own people as property? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot better. He cursed a fig tree for not being in season, and it
Mm-hmm.
bursted into flames
Mm-hmm.
because the fig tree wasn't in season. He even admitted in the Bible, like the fig tree wasn't in season. That's why
Mm-hmm.
it didn't bloom, but like
Mm-hmm.
screw it, and it burned down. He flipped a table because, in the church because people were worshiping other gods.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just, not to mention the Bible explicitly says, I can't remember what book. I want to say it's Matthew. Can't remember the verse, but um, no, maybe it's Romans. I think it's Romans, but it says you have to go to church. It says, and
Mm-hmm.
able to be a good, godly, God-loving Christian, you need to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
I have my Bible sitting right next to me. I probably could pull it up, but even like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, so this is my Bible, and these are my tabs in my Bible.
Wow.
I have 477 tabs in this Bible, and they
Mm-hmm.
range everything from slavery to rape to murder, and
Mm-hmm.
that's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see there's a lot of tabs in the Jesus part in the New
Mm-hmm.
Testament. So it's not like Jesus was saying that he not. I'm gonna say Jesus did say some good things. He says,
Mm-hmm.
treat others like you want to be treated and stuff like that. But at the same time, in the same breath, he's saying, treat your slaves like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in the same breath, and
It's a
it's
bit
just, and so those
confusing.
are the things that are throwing me off, is that people are focusing on the good things that he said and ignoring the bad things. And if
Mm-hmm.
you think that Jesus was God, if you don't believe in like the Trinity or anything, and you believe that Jesus was the physical God, then you have to go back to the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to account for all the things in the Old Testament that are really effed up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then that's a whole other can of worms, is the Old Testament. So depending on what Jesus you believe in, it can get real nasty. For me, the Bible is the claim, it's not the evidence.
Yes, 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 exactly. And for me, I just think that there's so many, like, countless instances of people using religion as a justification to oppress, murder, rape,
Absolutely.
kill people. And it's just, again, like, it's that's what has led me down this like questioning. So I will continue reading it.
Yeah, I encourage you to.
I will definitely go deeper into it for sure. Um, Another thing too is I tend to I'm very interested in near death experiences. I don't
Hmm.
know if you are familiar with near death
Yeah, I mean,
experiences.
I'm a little bit. I've never had any myself, but yeah, I'm a little familiar
Yeah,
with
I
them.
hope you haven't.
Yeah.
No. I haven't had any either, and I hope I never have that.
Right.
But I like to listen to people's accounts of their near death experiences, because I think for me it's another, like, for me it's evidence as to there's something much larger than what we see in our physical world, right? And I've listened to a couple of accounts where people were atheists, had near death experiences, and come back believing in a God. So I think for them that was like their evidence as to like there's definitely something out there, right? So I mean the reason why I brought that up, but you just said that you don't have that much, you're not
Mhm.
that aware
Well,
of
I mean, I
it.
can give you my opinion on them for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I would love to hear your
Because
opinion.
I've looked into it a little bit, and there has been some testing that's been done with near death experiences
Mhm.
where actually they would put pieces of paper on top of file cabinets in
Mhm.
operating rooms, and when people would flatline, they obviously that paper will be up there. The patient would be unaware that this paper is up there.
Mhm.
They would resuscitate this patient and ask them, "Hey, uh, what did you see in the room?" And they'd say, "Oh, I was flying above my body and I was seeing you guys operate on me." And they say, "What's on top of that file cabinet?" And they
Mhm.
go, there's nothing up there.
Mhm.
And sure enough, they're wrong. It
Mhm.
was a 100% fail rate
Mhm.
with the near
Mhm.
death experiences and the paper on the file cabinet.
Mhm.
It's been tested, and it hasn't shown that they were saying anything other than I could see my body. Um,
Mhm.
the thing is when you die, there your brain is freaking out. Your brain is
Mhm.
flooding with DMT. It's losing blood. It's losing oxygen. Um, you're essentially on psychedelics. You're flooding with DMT. You're tripping out. So yeah, you're gonna see some stuff. You're gonna hear some things. But whether you are actually perceiving those things or not is another question.
Mhm.
Um, I personally, so with the people, atheists dying and then coming back, and believing in a god, notice how it's most of the time, like, let's say it was someone who maybe grew up in a Muslim family
Mhm.
and they passed away and they came back believing in Allah. Or if it was a person in a Hindu family who died, they come back believing in Krishna or Vishnu. Or if it's a Christian who died, they come back believing in Jesus. They only believe in the gods that they are subjected to in their society, which is based off of whatever location they're in. It has happened, but it's extremely rare. Like, so rare it's barely even on the board. That people will die and see a god that, like a Christian will die and see Allah or something, or
Mhm.
Muhammad or something. And very rare that happens. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that these people are only seeing the gods that essentially they would see or want to see or possibly see, or maybe believed at one point. um it just is kind of odd to me, and it doesn't seem to match up. And uh
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean
it's
that
very weird.
I think that's a great point, because I noticed that too, because I've listened to countless accounts, and a lot of times like people do come back like verifying, if they are Christian, for example, they go to the other side and come back verifying that, oh, like I encountered Jesus, and
Mm-hmm.
vice versa with somebody who's like Muslim or Hindu. And then people who are atheists, like you said, they end up coming back believing in the God that their family believes in. Um, so yeah, I mean I do definitely agree with that point you have, but I do think that I do think that some of the tests to see if this is if it's true or not, and hey, who am I do think like sometimes it's I don't want to say oversimplified, because these are probably like they're not simple tests, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think that the explanations of like, oh, this is the experiment we did and this is this is the answer, so like this should be debunked. I definitely think is like very simple. I believe that some people fake these accounts, or like maybe they're not really having near death experiences, absolutely. But some of the accounts that I've heard, and I also want to say, like, a lot of my beliefs too are not coming from like thin air. Like, I've had personal experiences. Like, I haven't
Yeah.
had near death experiences, but I definitely have had things that I would say like are pretty high level psychic um like visions or interactions. They're not often. I would never call myself a psychic per se.
Right.
But and it's not something I want to tap into because it kind of scares me a little bit, but
Sure.
I have had situations where I'm like, explaining it to somebody else, you can't show the evidence, but I know for sure like this is what I experienced.
Yeah.
Um and so for me, I'm like, you know, it's not that hard for me to believe that people are able to
Yeah.
have those experiences, because I definitely do think that we are spiritual beings having human experience. Now, to the extent of what all of that means, I have absolutely no idea. But I do agree with you that that was one thing that I was like,
Yeah.
like
Like
it
that.
is, it's a bit,
That's the tricky thing with anecdotal experiences, like personal experiences that, who knows, maybe your personal experience, maybe that was a real experience. Like you actually did
yeah,
experience something.
yeah,
Who knows? I
yeah,
don't know. That's the thing, is that it it may be sufficient evidence for you.
yeah,
Maybe you did
right,
actually experience something, but until we can develop a test to replicate that, I have no
yeah,
reason to believe you, and it's
yeah,
like that's the thing that sucks about anecdotes, is that like I
yeah,
want to believe you, but
right.
I until I have evidence, I just, my skeptic meter just is going off.
Right, right. And I
Um,
and I think that's healthy. And
yeah.
I definitely do um I definitely do think that's healthy. And sometimes I thought about it as well. I was like, well, if there is a God, right? And like,
Mhm.
everybody's so diverse. Like like as human beings, we're diverse in the way we look. And of course, we're going to be diverse in the way we think and interpret things, right? So, if there's a higher power trying to communicate with me and I speak English, they're not going to come and communicate with me speaking
Right, right,
Mandarin. You know what I
right,
mean? Like,
right.
so if I grew up with the idea of Jesus my whole life, coming to me as something else that's not Jesus is just kind of, I might not know what that is or might not know how to interpret that, right? So but like I'm going to show you what you like understand as
Yeah.
evidence for whatever the situation is, right? So like,
Right, right.
you know and it that could be across you know different backgrounds and everything. So like that's how I kind of think about it. Again, I'm not saying that I'm correct, but that's just kind of like, maybe that's why it's happening, but I will never know. But it's definitely a question mark for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah. um well, this has been such a great conversation. I can keep going, but I have one question remaining before the final closing
Go for it.
question. And what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions people have about atheists?
Oh, geez. The biggest one is probably that I'm like a devil worshipping baby eater. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I don't believe in the devil either.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the devil either. And
Hmm.
babies, I mean, if you cook them right, no. no, no, no eating babies on my part. The only people that believe in the devil are Christians. Satanists don't even believe in Satan. So
Wait, are you serious?
yeah, Satanists don't even believe in a physical being named Satan. It's literally Christians and Muslims are the only people that actually believe in Satan.
So what do Satanists believe in?
It's essentially atheism with symbolism.
Mm.
It's they lack a belief in a god. There are a couple Satanists that will claim that they believe in a physical being known as Satan, and they're known as Luciferians.
Mm-hmm.
But the Satanist that I just spoke to, who's a member of the Church of Satan, he calls them heretical Christians, because you can't believe in Satan and also be a Satanist, because Satan, the definition of Satanist includes atheism. So
Oh, so it's
it
like an
doesn't.
FU to like
It's essentially a troll religion.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's a
all in
troll.
all,
Okay, okay,
yeah, all
okay,
in all, like there are many Satanists that will admit to that. It's a troll religion.
okay, okay.
And Luciferians are basically crazy Christians. They just believe that Satan is their Lord and Savior, and so
Okay,
they do some
that's pretty
not
dark.
okay stuff sometimes.
Yeah, that's
But yeah,
dark.
as far as misconceptions for me,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm that all I can talk about is religions. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, like a lot of my family members, tend to not speak to me because they know that I work for nonprofit organizations
Mm-hmm.
such as the Atheist Community of Austin, and
Mm-hmm.
I do my podcast, and they think that's all I can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
When it's no different than you. You know, you believe in God. I can
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation with you, and you don't talk about God. Just like
Yeah,
I can have a conversation, talk and not talk about not God too.
yeah,
I can talk about other
yeah.
things. So a lot of people think that that's all I can talk about when all in all, I love history. You know, my podcast started off more so as a history podcast where I covered a lot of Egyptian history. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I can talk about other things. I
Like
just am well
your
versed in,
identity, right? Your
yeah,
identity
I'm
is not atheist.
outspoken, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to know why people believe these things, but
yeah.
those are probably the biggest misconceptions.
Oh, those are spot on because a lot of people think a lot of people that I've talked to and just things that I hear like atheists like, oh, they must believe in Satan or they worship Satan, and it's like
Nope.
that has nothing to
It's
do.
I don't believe you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
as simple as that, is I don't believe you.
right,
It's not a
right.
claim. It's not a I don't believe or I believe your God is not real. It's just I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
and you have every right not to think so.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm glad that you brought those up. So final question, and you know the podcast is called The Word to the Wise. So final words of wisdom to the listeners, and it could be about what we've been talking about or something completely different that you just kind of keep in your back pocket as you go
Yeah.
through life.
So my big thing is question everything.
Mm.
Why do you believe the things that you believe? Do you have good justification to warrant those beliefs? And are you pushing those beliefs on other people? Are you letting your God belief enforce you voting for politicians? Do you vote for certain politicians just because they believe the same thing as you? Or do you vote on them based off of their policies and what they're going to do for your community? So, my word to the wise is stay skeptical.
Mm.
Practice healthy skepticism. Question everything. Don't just take something as truth. If I don't care if it's a doctor with multiple PhDs and a master's degree coming up to you and telling you that there's a pizza flying around the planet right now at light speed. Don't just believe him off the words that he's saying. Do your own research and come to your own conclusion.
Beautiful. Well said. Calvin, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on pretty much every social media platform: Instagram, Facebook. TikTok is a big one for me. I getting big following on TikTok. I have a Discord server you can join on there. I'm starting to get some people on there, do some debates and stuff.
Awesome.
YouTube, I have a link tree that basically links to everything that I do. So you can find me pretty much anywhere as long as you look for Unquestionable with Calvin Smith.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to be putting all of that in the show notes so they'll be able to find you pretty easily. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I had such a great time. This was amazing. I had a great time.